Greetings, everybody. I'm very pleased that you could join us. My name is Alex Grech. I'm the director of the Commonwealth Centre for Connected Learning, but I'm really here in my capacity as one of the partners in a project called DEL4ALL, or Digital Education for All. Today's a particularly fun topic of ours, I think, because we're going to try and engage with a number of projects that the European Commission has a hand in. And the people who are going to be involved in this session are very much involved from a technical perspective, sometimes from a policy perspective. So what we're hoping to achieve here within the whole realm of our project really is to get inputs that can at least, I guess, give a bigger, broader picture of where the Commission is going with blockchain and blockchain infrastructure, or projects that may be tunneling into the blockchain. We've basically got about an hour and a half lined up for this, and Luis and I were kind of joking because it's going to be interesting how we're going to do timekeeping. But vaguely, what we're going to do is I'll be handing over soon to Luis Alphonse Martin, who's the CIO, and I can never pronounce Luis's university. Let's just assume that Luis is absolutely key as a co-convener for the Diploma's use case of the EBSI project. Daniel Desay will then be taking over, and we'll be talking about sovereign identity paradigms and how this fits in within the way that the Commission is trying to empower citizens and protect the privacy. Henny Bulstra will then start tunneling into the Diploma's use case. Henny is a co-convener with Luis, and Dominic Veron will also be supplementing some of what you'll be hearing with some more technical information. My old friend Anthony Camilleri will then take over, and we'll be talking about the Europass project and the EDCI project, before handing back to Luis, who will be really looking at how these things really come together. My hope then is that we will be engaging. So whether we're seeing panel discussion and Q&As, I think we should just merge these two things into each other. So what I'll be doing and what Claudia will be doing is we'll be looking for the chat box and see if anybody wants to take the floor and start to engage on these subjects. I mean, just as a quick background to DEL4ALL, I mean, DEL4ALL was really set up to look at, the impact of emerging technologies on the state of digital education. So the whole idea is a traditional Horizon 2020 project. It's about creating a solid knowledge base and a collaborative and sustainable ecosystem, and defining a strategic and forward-looking agenda. And there are 3 work packages. I'm not going to go into a big detail about that because we've discussed this in the past. My message, though, to people who don't know anything about this project is that we are constantly reaching outwards to people who want to join our community of practice in terms of expertise. And you're very much welcome to collaborate on this project. COVID-19 has clearly made this project even more interesting, because we are not just looking at blockchains and AIs and virtual realities and augmented realities and digital games. Really, it's a question of now, what can we potentially do, as the education model looks like it's going to have to be repurposed because of what's just happened. Traditionally, our activities would have been a lot of roundtables and workshops. Those have all morphed now into this kind of online engagement. And perhaps I could just jump into this slide where we've had webinars which are looking at some of the models that we're actually developing. So, for example, there's a technology versus education matrix that Open University are driving. We have been having waves of surveys on how the pandemic has affected digital learning, for example, in the context of higher education institutions. Again, we're going from generic web workshops to more specialized workshops like this. I will talk to you about the third survey at the end of this, because we could do it with your help. And I guess this workshop today really is a way that it's almost like we've spent quite a lot of time looking at the blockchain. Now it's almost like we would need to pull out and really see what the Commission's role is going to be in the near future in facilitating blockchain projects for the public good, but specifically in this particular case for education purposes. So really, that's what I had for you in terms of an introduction. I'm going to stop sharing my slide, and what we would like to do from now on is that Luis will be driving most of the session, and let's make this as informal as possible. I mean, I'm quite happy that if somebody wants to ask a question as we go along, that I will tell whoever is speaking that maybe they should be looking at clarifying something if something is not clear. So, Luis, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you also DEL4ALL for giving us the opportunity to share the things that EBSI is doing, and at the end, how technology can also help education, and especially on these times. So today we will start with accreditation. That's what really relates more to EBSI stage, but as we will announce, we expect to come back another day to talk about the second release of the webinar that will be announced at the end. Okay, so before moving on, as you have seen, we have a packed agenda, so I will try to go as faster as I can to let the guys that really know about that explain how technology will add real value, and how this new building block will be also, for me, just not another building block, because blockchain is not only about technology, it's also about how relations between actors and this intermediation can really enable new paradigms. So the slides will be there just for your convenience after the webinar, so you can go deeper on them. And please, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach us just for more explanations of that. Okay. Before moving on, let's have a brief introduction about today's reality in education. And I think that this is the most common reality on most of the countries, and also not only in Europe. So the reality today is like this. We have solid ecosystems for education, primary, and also often primary is also is isolated from secondary education. We have a tertiary. We have also all the stage where an employer or an employer also needs to be skilled or reskilled or upskilled, and also adult education. But this is the reality, and also is the reality from a more governance and perspective. We have also here primary and secondary, then we move to employment, and tertiary education, we move to employment, and as an employer or an employer, we also have needs for skilling, reskilling, and so on. But this is the reality today, and we need to move to a new reality. Why? Because we are moving, we are not moving, we are living in the digital society, and technology is here. It's here to change the way we work, to change at the end also the way we live. And this is it. And the information is really the new fuel for economy. And it is really important to focus on the user, the citizen, because really we need to change how we provide services and put the citizen in the middle and see, okay, how we can collaborate to provide services, and the services that really the citizen expects to be provided, and on the way they expect to be provided. So we need a more customer-centric approach, and not the actual situation or the actual reality that is in most of the cases an institutional approach. And it is the citizen that must come to us to consume the services and provide the service as we think they expect. And this is what really we need to change. So also, and there are a lot of communications and publications related to this. Education is changing and needs to also to change. And the title, the diploma title itself, it's not enough for today's reality. And we need to move to these new realities. And also, we also have to keep in mind that at the end, yes, technology is a key enabler. In some cases, really opens a new paradigm, but always technology relates to a business strategy. But we have opportunities, yeah, I think so. And we can add value to the diploma, to the title itself, okay? Describing what is related to what's the context related to the title, to the diploma, and also adding competences that the citizens, the learners are gaining on their learning path, and also describing the skills, because this is really what where we are moving today, and especially these basic skills that any EU citizen should have. And we need to align the offer to the demand, to the employer's demands, because this is the reality. And for that, we need new flexible models. Higher education especially needs a more flexible way to work, to identify, to define new titles, and sorry, okay, sorry, apologize. So I was, please, if you are not talking, please stay mute. So if not, there are some echoes. Okay, so I said that especially higher education needs new flexible models to design and create new titles, and also enable these flexible quests, because at the end, I think that till today, the goal for a higher education institution was just, okay, the graduation of the complete the learning path from a student. But today we need to evolve that, because we will enter onto a new paradigm, and maybe the strategic goal for an institution will be, okay, at least the 20, the 30, the 40% of the time that the student will be attached to us, she or she should be with our institution, because I think that the students will no more be on the same educational institution for all his learning path. This is the new reality. And of course, we need to identify these new opportunities and see, okay, why not? Why higher education institution cannot also move to new paradigms and also offer in-company education, but also upskilling, reskilling for employers. Why not? So this is something that is also just in conversation today. And for that, I think that the European Union has clearly identified that we need the citizens for tomorrow. Is the citizens that we are just teaching today are the citizens for tomorrow, and they have identified that a competent digital citizen is a key point, and for that they are just enabling several strategies, but also directives and so on. And these are especially the digital strategy and digital action plans, but also the digital education action plan, the European education area, and also related to those higher education institutions that also have or do research, the new also European research area. All these things, and especially in the data strategy, they also talk about digital credentials strategy, and they recommend that every member state should have all these or the translation to all these action plans and digital strategies in each member state by 2022. This will really enable a new model for society. Okay, so today we will talk about a building block, but as I announced before, I think that this is not just another building block for me, and I think that all the presenters for today we are on the same page. EBSI actually will be also a key enabler for the public good. For the public good in European Union. What's a building block? Yes, I think that just for those that are not aware of that, so a building block is just a service, but it's also designed to bring trust across borders, and this is so important because at the end, one of the main principles for Europe and all the digital strategies and so on, and related to education, is mobility and also trust and cross-border trust. So there are several building blocks, and these are pieces that each member state can use and reuse for their own public services, but with this cross-border trust value. One of them is EBSI. And what is EBSI? The European Blockchain Service Infrastructure. So this will be a pan-European blockchain that will bring that trust, and related to diplomas, the educational trust for several use cases. One of them is Diploma, and we will, Henny will introduce that deeper later. But and we will also introduce another use case that started also just as another use case, but as Daniel will explain later, it will be not just another use case, because this use case, and I am talking about the European Social Identity Framework, will also be a key enabler for the digital society paradigm, and also to change the way the citizens relate to public services, but also to private sector. The reality today, the EBSI started in 2019, and this February 2019, and in February this year, EBSI version 1 was already released, and now we are working on EBSI version 2. We will deeper in the details later, but today, and this is an updated slide, 39 nodes are expected to be running in 2020. 33 of them are hosted by member states, and also the European Commission hosts 6 nodes. Okay, so let's now introduce this use case from EBSI that Daniel, please, will introduce us. I will just say next slide, and I will jump from one to another, Daniel.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Luis. A little ratification from what is said. We are not bringing just merely the European Commission view. It is a network of member states and Commission, and that will be a bit the strange thing. So in those kind of networks, who are you working for? We are working for the network. So it's not something that only the Commission will do, or it's a combination with different member states. It makes it a bit difficult, and also whose behalf we are speaking, of course. But bear that in mind. Okay, I've seen of course also the participant list. This is a bit introduction in SSI. For some of you, this will be more than the basic and already set, but I give you the position of SIF, of course, and for people who are not familiar also. Next slide, please. Okay. Start with a quote of somebody, a very influencer in financial world and also in identity world, of David Birch. And he states that we cannot build services for the post-industrial age, as the age that we are currently in, using the identity infrastructure of the industrial age. We need a new digital infrastructure. And this is a bit the key message that we are now looking and why we are this approaching. The current solution that we use are very much digitalized paper-based solutions, and the password, the unique identity. So we need to come out to another approach. Next slide. And I'm going to give you a brief overview for, okay, but what is wrong with that current identity solution? So what are the limitations? Next slide. If we look at the current identity or data handling by governments, by banks, this picture gives a good illustration. You cannot easily access your data. It's guarded. In the best cases, hopefully, it's guarded by other institutions that keep it for you. You need to pass the cards before you get it. What are governments trying to do, or banks? In next slide. They are building a lot of portals. Okay, the information is not accessible. Okay, we build a portal so you can access that information. So you access the government portal, you access single digital gateway and all those kind of things, and you can access the information, but information that you cannot be used in another context. So those portals are very closed and doesn't give a solution that you actually want. Next slide. And when governments or private organizations try to link different sources in the well-known once-only principle, it's a very difficult and cumbersome situation. In certain countries, they have made progress with crossroad databases, but not still at the level that the citizen expects. And certainly, if you go public sector and so on, then it's very difficult. Also, the movement of my data is trying to solve that, but the problem that there arises, you give data to the citizens, but how can he prove that the data is from real value? So the my data movement is very difficult because they are not able to share the data in a format that the user can do. Next slide. And what the problem is also arises with the current situation is, how can you share in a discrete way information? Giving access to other parties from your information gives the possibility to certain providers that they can track every movement. When I share information, I don't want certain other parties to know what I'm sharing on behalf of other people. So that is also a big problem. Next slide. And when institutions get certain information, how can they trust those digital paper information? It's not solved currently today. You get some information, you get Chinese, American documents, but how can you really know they can trust it? And you have very cumbersome situations to trust that information. Next slide. And we share too much information. When certain documents are shared, you get a lot of information where you don't want to share that. So in a discrete way and in a limited way, how can we share this information? The current systems are not able to do that. Next slide. We have solutions today, but they are very limited to what identity management is. It's just merely identification of authentication. That only solves the top problem. Next slide. And we have, of course, the problem that how can we have a real consent management? If I share information, how can I get that information back or limit that information? Currently in the consent management systems, you have only the possibility to register your consent on the other side, not on your personal side. So there's no symmetric thing about consent management. Next thing, slide. And we have, of course, the problem where you don't have one sole identity, not one national identity. You have multiple identities. You are now forced to use different identity providers to see what kind of identity you use. I use my Google account, I use my national identity, I use multiple things. So that is also a big challenge that we have also in all the identity level. Next slide. So we see that there are a lot of breakpoints in the current centralized solutions and the centralized approaches. So we need another approach to solve those problems in a structural way. And that's come decentralization as a new concept and the self-sovereign identity. And what we also relate that the European aspect in. Next slide. Maybe I don't need to introduce this guy, but he wants to have that self-sovereign identity is something that is a next step beyond user-centric. It's not only about making it personalized, it's giving the user the real central of all the administration of identity. He's the actor. Next slide. And then you get these very simple models that will solve a lot of problems. Put the user in control and in the central point, let him store his credentials in his data store, and then interact with all the parties that he wants for that information. Yeah? In this example, simple flow, you have already seen that. University gives request, the citizen request Diploma credential, university issues that, and he can use that credential, which is anchored also in a ledger, present that to an employer. Yeah? That kind of information can easily be checked without going back to the university and seeing that it's authentic, it's not been tampered, and so on. So those kind of models make it much easier than having all universities link and interact with all employer. Yeah? And of course, we have an important aspect, what is a ledger that also contains the anchoring, the extra aspect. Next slide. This will give the possibility to citizen to collect a lot of potential credentials. So here is an example of all the documents that if a citizen wants to get a job abroad, needs to collect and needs to present. The basic identities, penal records, diplomas, reference, payslip, all those kind of things, they are now always paper-based, and he needs to prove them to the future employer abroad that he also acts them. Yeah? So he has, in the real world, a very big problem to get that authentication up and running. Yeah? Next slide. With this kind of approach, of course, you also give an advantage, more security, that placing that student or citizen in the middle. You don't, with this approach, need to have a unique identifier that gives potential correlation of control of transaction by entities. You have also no centralization of those kind of things. There's also no personal data store access, so that we can, as a third party, just go into like in the G drive, and also no risk of sharing too much information. So it solves a lot of problems, that approach, which we are currently faced to, and we don't have a solution in the centralized approaches. Next slide. And this model we want also to use within that, what Louis has mentioned, European blockchain service infrastructure. What we actually want to do in that project is not to replace, take over that whole decentralized approach, but add an added value. So we want that governments, public administrations can use that paradigm. Align it with GDPR, align it with the trust framework that we know in the IDAS, all those kind of things we want to bring into in that existing and emerging ecosystems, so that we have potential more interaction, giving also all those valuable government services and sources back to the citizen. Next slide. What we are doing is building a lot of specifications towards member states, towards issuing party, relying party, how that could be evolving. So giving you an example on a relying party. Next slide. And also on legal aspects, because already mentioned, I think, by Alex and also by Louis, this is not only a technical problem, it's also a big legal problem. You have also the GDPR aspects that you need. So we are producing specification, we are producing legal assessment. Next slide. And also trying to see how the components that we actually build are based, of course, on standards that the market is also using. The verifiable credential, the ID, and so on, so that we are seeing those same things. Next slide. What is our planning? So we are in version 2 now, where we have defined and start building the things. And now we come in the phase where the different member states will be starting to use the pilots. So we have different pilots that member states of the 28 member states, 27 member states are being used, and we are also trying to plan the transition. Next slide. One last slide to I end it. The ESIF was a project how to see how we can decentralize identity, how we can have another approach, how we can have a solution for things. Was a bit experimental, but now Europe is also want to look at a new secure European e-identity. So for us, there's a very important possibility and opportunity to link the new concept that's emerging and bring it into in this new approach. Europe wants mid next year plan to have that European e-identity based on control over the personal data and having them fall in control. So the privacy is very important. The non-correlation is very important. It's not been defined that the European identity will be a self-sovereign identity, but we can certainly at this moment, at this very important moment, inspire that new approach. So that gives us a bit an overview of, very briefly, of course, of what the SSI could potentially do and how we, as governments, as the European Blockchain Partnership, are trying to invest in that. Okay, back to you, Louis.
Okay, thank you so much, Daniel. Now let's let Dominic introduce us how ESIF and all the concept behind this ESIF, verifiable credentials, so on, can be extended, can be applied to education. Dominic, your turn.
Yeah, thanks, Luis, and thanks, Daniel. So my role now is a little bit to bridge Daniel's introduction of ESIF as well as Henny's more in-depth description of the diploma use case, which is why I will talk about two things. First, and this is what you see on the slide, is show you a little bit what SSI means in practice in terms of selected use cases that could be interesting in the education domain to make it a little bit more easier to grasp, right? As a kind of, in-depth view into the many use cases that Daniel was talking about before. And then after this, I will very briefly explain a little bit more why Diploma UC will actually use ESIF and EBSI, and how this relates to this this term trust that's always thrown around. So to start off with the selected use cases that you can see here, these are actually 5, let's say, processes or use cases that everyone working in education knows and that are currently working, let's say, suboptimal, in a sense that, as Daniel said before, we're living in a world where all these databases and digital systems are actually divided. And our data is actually also fragmented and divided within these different systems. And that has far-reaching implications if we think about the onboarding of new students and staff, about authentication, membership, student mobility, and accreditation. Starting with accreditation, this is kind of probably the most obvious use case that could be pursued in the context of education, and this is also the starting use case of ESIF. The basic idea is to replace, or let's say, at least add to physical credentials, physical diplomas, digital ones that can be easily shared, that can be easily verified by students to, for example, get jobs. So here the idea is really to go, as Daniel said before, beyond what current identity systems can do, like authentication and access management, and already put different kinds of information on those digital identity credentials that are used within ESIF, namely diplomas, but could also be, grades list, honors, could be anything. Related to this, student mobility. Today, if a student goes from one country to another, from one institution, the issue that these education institutions use different systems, which makes it very difficult for the incoming and outgoing organization to coordinate everything that's happening, right? Onboarding a new student, making sure that all the transcripts and information about grades are actually being recognized at different universities. So what SSI could do here is similar as in the case of accreditation, make it possible for students to have all kinds of information required by incoming and outgoing education institutions available and easy to share in a digital form, so that this whole so that every process related to student mobility can be facilitated to potentially, you know, a single click. And further, membership. Students are currently having, in most cases, physical credentials to prove their student ID, which they can use to, let's say, access educational services, or maybe even procure products and services at a discounted rate. However, the thing is that those physical membership cards have also some drawbacks, right? They're easily lost, forgotten, they cost some money, they're hard to verify. So here again, a potentially very interesting use case for SSI in the education domain. And the same goes basically for onboarding. So bringing a new student or staff into a university system, or authentication and access management by replacing, for example, a myriad of solutions that are currently used with simple authentication based on self-sovereign identity. So what you can see from here is that in the educational sphere alone, we have 5 different use cases that come in different flavors and can really solve many issues that we have today in order to enable people to have more seamless user experiences and more secure and privacy-enhancing interactions online. So how does all of this is actually enabled by SSI and by ESIF and EBSI? How you can think about it is that EBSI provides the very basic layer of registries that we use to establish trust. So for example, what EBSI can do with registries where universities are listed or accreditation organizations are listed that can actually accredit universities to issue certain types of diplomas. So what this does is it introduces a very secure shared database for anyone to find out who they can trust in an education ecosystem. So it enables, for example, an employer to check if a certain digital credential was really issued by the university that is stated on this digital credential. So that's why when we talk about EBSI, we are talking about these trusted registries, what we call them, and how they establish trust. In addition to this, we have ESIF, and ESIF, the European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework, kind of builds and utilizes EBSI in a sense that it makes sure that we have the specifications for the EBSI trusted registries, but also in a sense that it makes sure that we can have the blueprints of these digital credentials that we use to exchange diplomas or student IDs and so on. And this is actually what we're specifying and what Daniel showed you before. So ESIF is basically creating the templates or blueprints that can then be reused by the educational domain, the diploma use case, but potentially by any other use case, from social security to public transportation. I hope this helped you to understand a little bit better how SSI can be introduced to the education sector, and also a little bit better how EBSI, ESIF, and Diploma actually relate and fit together. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out later. I'll stick around for the panel discussion. But now I'll hand over to Henny to talk a little bit more about the education use case in depth. Thanks.
Thank you, Dominic. And also important to remark that from a technological perspective, you can provide, or you can get access to all 3 services from only one technological framework, and that's also important from a technological perspective, or like a service provider. Okay, Heini, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I see a lot of familiar faces, so welcome everybody. I will just take, let's say, some 5 minutes to dive a bit deeper into the use case of EBSI, the use case diplomas. And as is highlighted here, you have the actually there are 4 use cases provided by EBSI, or where we are working on. The one is the European Self-Sovereign Identity. identity framework to be more specific, where Dominic and Daniel highlighted it. And I want to tell you something about the diploma management use case, or use case diplomas, where Louise and I are the conveners of. Next slide, please. So what the purpose is of the use case diplomas really in basic is to provide reusable specifications and services that will allow those citizens and educational institutes, all private companies, to really manage education attributes and credentials across borders, and giving control back to the citizens when managing their education credentials. And this is, of course, rather a paradigm shift, and significantly reducing verification costs and improving authenticity, trust, and enabling real interoperability. And the desired outcome of this use case, together with EBSI, is, of course, in itself, mass adoption of this EBSI solution by, of course, the educational organizations and private companies of Europe, whereby EBSI will become the common underlying building block, or let's say the highway of golden standard for public services on blockchain, to issue, manage, and verify diplomas and other educational credentials for all citizens and employees. Next slide, please. And the driving principles are that we want, of course, to share and authenticate diplomas across national borders in Europe, and of course also beyond, and clearly facilitate self-sovereign identity for EBSI end users. And very important, we want to align with other European educational institutes. For example, Europass, and Anthony will elaborate on that. And very important, we will have a clear governance architecture based on international quality assurance standards and a clear set of ground rules. And why we are doing this is that we see that blockchain is an enabler to redefine trust in a rather complex ecosystem, and it will encourage future use by member states. And on the left, you see a schema on actors and business scenarios we defined together with member states. Next slide, please. To let this be successful, you have to cope with a lot of challenges. And one of the biggest challenges, of course, is the challenge of interoperability. And this comes with a lot of dimensions. I will mention only four, but it depends on the view you have. You have interoperability on technical issues, on semantics, on legal issues, but also on organizational issues. And the speakers before stated that, yes, of course, blockchain can be seen as a technology, but if you don't see that all these other dimensions are also very important, you're missing the point. It's not just about technique only. The technique will do slightly more than just being a tool. Next slide, please. So what we do with the diploma use case is that we use the common data model to describe educational credentials and describe the contents of educational achievements. And the package in which we store these contents is the verifiable credentials, the common way to package information, the content. Next slide, please. The other issue is the interoperability on the organizational dimension. Next slide, please. Because the educational systems within Europe, the policy, the member states have their own sovereignty on their educational institutes and the way accreditation is modeled within their member states. And on the left, you see what Dominic was referring to, where we set up a flexible governance structure to accommodate the accreditation models within member states. Okay, and on the right, you see the business scenarios and the actors we define together with the member states. Next slide, please. And of course, with this new paradigm on self-sovereign identity and the use of blockchain, also new challenges arise within existing legal frameworks on different levels, both on national, European level, to take, for instance, the GDPR, EIDAS, and single digital gateways. And as we speak, legal analysis on identity, you have to think of levels of assurance, data, governance, registries, etc., is being carried out by the European Commission together with us, the European Blockchain Partnership. Next slide, please. So how do we work? I think the number one issue is that we with EBSI in the use case Diploma, we acknowledge the complexity of this global educational ecosystem. It's not just a tool which has to be implemented on universities, no. It's a lot of challenges you have to overcome. So what we did was we involved the domain experts that truly understand the complexity of this educational ecosystem, and the use of standards, and the one that Daniel was referring to, the W3C, for instance, and aligning with the existing European educational institutes, where we reuse the Europass learning model, or EDCI, and Anthony will go further into that detail. And as we speak, we are now engaging with the member states to set up a clear governance architecture based on international quality assurance standards, and we frequently engage with those member states. And to get a grip on what kind of key agents and stakeholders are eminent in your member state to get this thing running, and also the legal aspects and existing initiatives within those member states to become, let's say, an early adopter. Because I truly believe that if we want to be successful with EBSI, we have to learn and to experiment with this new technology. It's about reinventing trust and a new way of thinking, and to put us really into the new digital society. And this is slightly different, to put it mildly, than a digitized society. So that's it for me. Thank you. Back to you, Luis.
Thank you, Henny. Yeah, you're right. At the end, the main goal is just let EBCI be used and be useful. That's the main goal for us. Okay, let now Anthony introduce us to the other great European Union project that, as Henny explained, is directly linked to EBCI. Anthony, please, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you very much. We can jump to the next slide straight away. The idea behind Europass digital credentials is really to address specific problems that are unique to digitization of credentials in Europe. We have been seeing that, let's say, in the move from paper to digital, things have not necessarily been going as well as we would hope. Paper might be inefficient, but it has the advantage of being universally interoperable. Nobody has ever rejected a credential or a diploma because you provided it on paper. But in the move to digital, when we do an analysis of the market, we find that there are a lack of standards to govern digital credentials. And here we're talking about content standards to describe what's in them. There's a set of problems around interoperability, in that quite often credentials are stuck within walled gardens, and you can only use your credential within the environment of the company that issued you these credentials. And we have a problem around legal validity, in that digital credentials will not necessarily be accepted as valid documents by courts of law, by public administrations, and so on. So in 2018, as part of the Digital Education Action Plan, the Commission committed to creating an initiative around digitally signed qualifications at the time, as part of the new Europass, with the intention of creating a European framework that addresses these issues. Next slide, please. This Europass is a wider set of tools which allow for any citizen in Europe to be able to manage their skills, their qualifications, their learning pathways, and their career pathways. So the wider Europass project is actually meant to be essentially a one-stop shop for your learning and professional life online. And to do this, it's made up of 4 interlocking components. The first is an interoperability mechanism, which is a set of technical tools and APIs that allow for different actors such as ministries of education, job boards, accreditation data providers, skills data providers, to all be able to essentially share data and become interoperable within the Europass platform. The second component of this is an e-portfolio section. And the e-portfolio is essentially an online service which allows you as a citizen to document your learning and career experience and to create CVs which you are able to send to employers. The third component of this is information provision, and the type of information we provide is, first of all, information on learning and employment systems. How do you work in different countries in Europe? How do you study in different countries in Europe? The second part of this is access to job search and learning opportunity search, with the aim of having, let's say, a single search service which can give you access to any employment or learning opportunity in Europe, and which can also recommend these to you on the basis of the learning you have received and the jobs you have done in the past. The final part of this puzzle is the digital credentials infrastructure. And the digital credentials infrastructure is essentially first of all, it's the trust service that allows for verified credentials to be used within this system. And also it's the machine readable layer that allows for the transfer of data on your own accomplishments to happen between institutions via computer readable text. Next slide, please. So the Europass actually launched in July 2020. We can just bring up everything on the slide. And it's a central part to the EU's employment strategy for the next 10 years. So it's important to mention Europass is not a technology project. It's not a development project. It's a live service being offered to citizens. And the EU is quite committed to continuing this. So actually, the new Europass is an upgrade of, well, the old Europass, which is a service that's been around for already 15 years. And digital credentials are highlighted as part of all of these policy documents which have come out of the Commission in the last year. So the key message I just want you to take away from here is that digital credentials will remain a key part of EU employment strategy for the years to come. To give you an idea, the Europass at the moment creates 10,000 new wallets every day for citizens. Next slide, please. So to talk a little bit about the elements of the digital credentials. So to be able to build all of this, we realized that, first of all, the EU does not want to become the single credentials wallet for Europe. That isn't the role of the Commission, and there's no desire to compete with the private sector in this element. Rather, what we wanted to do was create an infrastructure that allows for any citizen to have credentials, to allow for trading of these credentials, and to allow for certain basic principles to be observed by these credentials, such as data portability. So to do this, we needed to build out an entire infrastructure to do this. And that infrastructure is made up of 3 pillars. The first is one of standards. And the main standard is the Europass learning model, which I'll talk about in a moment, supported by other standards about how to create an issuer, how to create a wallet, how to create an accreditation database, etc. The second pillar is the services offered by the European Union itself. And at the moment, this contains of a EDCI issuer, which is our service for creating credentials, a wallet, which allows students to store those credentials, and the viewer that allows you to view, verify, and export credentials, as well as of Europass, which will be the code for all the services we're offering. We offer a playground and API library to allow developers to create code. And this is supported by business and technical help desks that can provide advice on everything from implementing a national credentialing strategy down to, let's say, code support for developing the software. Next slide, please. So the core of all of this is the Europass learning model. And up till now, there has not been a data model that allows you to issue credentials to students, that it's applicable for formal and non-formal learning, that allows for European legally valid digital signatures, and which is, let's say, valid across all states of the European Union in a multilingual format. We did a detailed analysis of every data standard out there, and none of them matched all these criteria. So a key part is saying that we have established a unitary data model for credentialing within the European education area. If we think about this in terms of a credential, it means that we have the basic fields that come from a verifiable credential, which means that we have metadata about the credential, date, revocation, etc., information about the issuer, claims about the person, which is the subject of the credential, and the proof. And in a Europass credential, the proof is an ETL. In terms of what can we describe about a person, the idea is that we can describe pretty much anything you do related to learning. So we can describe an activity you have performed, and that might be attending this webinar, or doing 100 hours of coursework, or attending an apprenticeship. But activity is a verb. It's something you've done. It doesn't tell us anything about what you have achieved as a result of that. So if you can say that you've achieved something, such as you've achieved the learning outcome, we then have the concept of achievements. And achievements describe the acquisition of learning outcomes or skills. And if you want to, you can also say that you know that as the result of an assessment. So a typical example might be that you have achieved the German qualification of a painter, which represents the learning outcome of the skill of painting as proven by a final examination. The third part of this is entitlements, and entitlements are there to represent things you have the right to do as the result of getting an achievement. Typical examples might be you might need a painter's license to work as a painter, which you get because you have the qualification. Membership to a medical chamber or to the law bar. It can also be used to represent your entitlement to pursue further studies. So compulsory education gives you the right to enter tertiary education, for example. So all of these are entitlements that can be represented directly inside the credential. The last part of this is attestations. And attestations are credentials that say something about other credentials. The typical example here would be a recognition certificate from an ENIC-NARIC center that says a credential issued in Germany is recognized in Finland, for example. Next slide, please. So all of the things I've been saying have been under development for, well, since 2018, and digital credentials are being piloted in 18 member states. And you can see the list of states in front of you. At the moment, we are in public beta, so anyone can go to the Europass.eu website, click on the digital credentials in the footer, and access this whole system, try it out and use it. And credentials issued there are already legally valid. But we are not, let's say, in full promotion or full production yet. So we will move to what we call 1.0, most probably in January, Corona allowing, and then our focus will move from piloting towards supporting the development of national credentialing strategies with member states. Next slide. Just a couple of screenshots to show you what we're talking about. This one, first of all, is the EDCI issuer, which is the tool that allows you to create credentials online. And you see that we allow you to create credentials via 3 paths. One is through an online interface where you build everything through the web. You can also do it via an Excel template, or you can do it by essentially uploading an XML file that has been exported by your system. Next slide, please. Last part of this is showing the credential itself. So this is a credential as displayed in our viewer. And just to show you the parts of it very quickly, on the left-hand side, you see that there are tabs which show you different rich data. So we can describe extremely rich data down to a very, very high level of granularity about what you have done, what you have achieved, what you have entitled. In the middle, you see what we call the visual representation of the diploma. So this is just the pretty one for your wall, effectively. And on the right-hand side is the real magic of digital credentials. So there you see that we don't just run a single authenticity check, but we run at the moment 5 different verification checks. The first is one on format, where we check if this credential matches the rules for issuing credentials and the metadata, not just of our model, but of models provided to us by any country in Europe. We check the validity of the seal. We can check to see if the person who holds the credential is the same person described in the EID of the account that is linked to the wallet. We can check if the credential has been revoked against the revocation list. We can check if that credential has been accredited by a national quality assurance agency or other national accreditation body. And we can check to see if that credential has been expired. I think you appreciate that running all these checks in a paper-based world could sometimes take weeks and tons of checks. The main sell of digital credentials is that here we have reduced this weeks-long verification process to a matter of seconds. So that's a quick overview of Europass digital credentials. It's important to say that, let's say, Europass digital credentials do not use EBSI at the moment. We see EBSI as the next natural evolution of credentials technology that would bring enhanced security, enhanced privacy for users, as well as improved performance around issues of immutability. And to us, let's say, the Europass and the Europass digital credential system will remain the front end for digital credentials for the foreseeable future in Europe. But with the help of EBSI and with the help of tools like EBSI, we can hopefully significantly upgrade the user experience in years to come.
Okay, thank you very much, Anthony. And now just to enforce what Anthony was just telling now, let's see how the future could look like. And just a reminder, I will not go again, I will not repeat what the European learning model can do, but also just a reminder that we are talking about how to prove the learning, the achievements and learning outcomes. Okay, and that's what EBSI will allow us to do, and it will also be important to have the correspondence with other existing data models. And as we will talk now, this is something that is also or done. ELMO, the correspondence between the European Learning Data Model and ELMO, MREX ELMO, is already available. And in short, also the PESC data model could be also the correspondence between the PESC and the European Learning Data Model could be achieved. And why not? Yes, next year, but it will just start the evaluation next year. Also the correspondence with open badges. And this is how, related to the last Anthony's comments, how things could be. And it's important to remark that the upper layer, all the components that Anthony was just describing before, that are existing components for Europass, these could stay as they are and can relate to the ones provided by EBSI on all these trust registries, and also all the building blocks from European Commission, like the EIDAS bridge and things like that, or services like the Euro login. And also important that we also foresee that the market could provide those enterprise and personalized wallets with added value, more options, not only for data credentials, but also for financials and so on. And at the end, the market will provide and will differentiate from other solutions with those added values, but also the evolution for applications that will be EBCI compliant and will understand and play with new opportunities on this peripheral credentials paradigm, and also related to the self-sovereign identity. This is how a picture of how these two things can fit together, and we, or at least I personally expect that we will move on in short to this. In short, it really means maybe 1 year, 2 years. Okay. Okay. What is? I want to remark that all the upper layer exists today, so it makes sense to move on this direction, and then just expect the joint effort between the two projects. And at the end, just I think that this is the last slide. So just remark that really EBCI can bring a new paradigm and can really break the siloed system and enable this long line learning, these personal pathways. And as Anthony said, we can also add value to the alignment to the digital strategy, and also enable those once only principle, but from the citizen side, and not just for the public institutions. And I think that this is all for today. Thank you all of us, to all of you. Alex, I think that now the floor is yours again.
Thanks. It's, as you can see, it was a marathon session. And the fact when Luis told me how many slides we had, I think it was a question of can we get through it. We're clearly running a bit late according to what we had in mind. And my suggestion would be that right now, if somebody would like to ask a question, whether you ask it on the chat or actually unmute yourself and ask a question, that would be, you'd be most welcome. I mean, I think the one question, I'm going to ask an uncomfortable question to all the panels, and I mean, I do have some association with this project. I think Luis said, this will be roundabout there in about 1 year, 2 years time. At one stage, he said that the top layer is almost there. What risks do we see? Okay, that we build this, or the Commission builds this, and that the response will be muted. What challenges does the panel see in this happening or not happening within the next 24 months? Unless somebody else wants to ask a question, in which case you can forget that question. It's not a trick question. And I mean, and if you notice, it was also a question about interoperability, I think, which is one of the things that Henny mentioned. Daniel, would you like to go in on this one?
Yes, because it's not a trick question, but it's a very difficult question. And it was the $1 million question. You have, of course, legacy systems that work in complete other ways. Yeah? And you need to bring to those systems, those people also, an incentive to move towards that direction. And that will not be easy in the coming year to enforce that. Yeah? So even some people also mentioned, okay, why try harder? The current systems, okay, they have limitation, but at a certain extent they work. Yeah? So you have to overcome that barrier. Yeah? but the Commission and all the member states, I believe in that, so they will provide incentives to do that. I think one of the most important is that they get support, they get some funding to make that transition. And even in the transition, we are now actively looking at, okay, what could be, okay, we have now presented more the end goal, the dream of the decentralized aspect. What could be more hybrid models that you at least use certain things? I think Europass is a kind of hybrid model that already emerging, is setting a step. Of course, maybe not a step that we all want to do and further, but how can we progress? So it is also looking at those kind of things to incentivize certain people and to start the transition. And of course, you also need to realize, and there's more complexity for the citizen, is not that relevant only to have the diploma credentials. For him, it's more relevant if he have more credentials. So then it will be more interesting, of course. But I know that maybe Henny can also mention that some countries are also looking, okay, how can we have a real pilot, a bigger pilot on those kind of things to make it on a large scale. I think a government could be playing that role as facilitator.
Yes, actually, we in the Netherlands are seeking opportunities to engage with ESIF to really have let's say our system of self-sovereign identity, to build a prototype together with EBSI version 2 to get a higher level of authentication. And to come back to your question, Alex, I think as we started, this is not only about technology. You have to frame it in the in terms of benefits for the real stakeholders, and as far as the stakeholders for ESIF and diplomas are, of course, the citizens and the higher educational institutes, and they really want to know, why should I use it? What is the benefit above and on top of all the things I'm using right now? And I think that's one of the barriers you have to overcome to really talk in a language, to frame it in the language of the higher educational institutes, and to let's say, in my words, seduce them to try pilots on with this new technology, because it is coming. It is coming, and it's not only about the incentives with COVID, and you see an enormous volatility in switching and enhancing your credentials. They have to adapt, but they really want to know what's in it for me, and when is the right time to move. And what we can offer them, I guess, is let's say we understand the complexity, and we are reusing, or we are combining the good things that are already there. And the thing that Anthony is saying, and I think the last model that Louise was showing, I think that's a good starting point to see for member states and also stakeholders. Okay, but what is the bigger picture? What's the big picture I see? So that's my contribution.
We've got about 4 questions coming in, so I propose to take these literally in the order that they've come in. So the first one is from Wolfgang Prinz, who's Wolfgang heads up Fraunhofer together with Commonwealth Center for Connected Learning, with Open University and Martell, our partners in DEL4ALL. So Wolfgang is saying, in Germany, I know that a few startups also address these use cases. Is their business model in danger, given the fact that the EU will install such an infrastructure, or can they actually benefit from it? Anybody would like to take this one?
Well, they will benefit. Our purpose has always been, okay, what is our place in the market? How can we interact with those players? We've seen that the startups, it is a big and very complex project. We've seen some startups trying to do that, but they're managing the wallet, they're managing the infrastructure, manage all the university. That's too big for them. So what we are doing is an infrastructure get those kind of things alignment, that the public sectors also align on those kind of things, have the infrastructure, and then they need to connect their wallets or their conclusion and those kind of things. But of course, you need to also see, EBSI is an infrastructure of public services. To see the government see this as a responsibility to format that. They don't also want to hand over all that public information to a small startup or private company. They need to be responsible of those kind of things. So they want to hand it over to the citizens and build that infrastructure. So it will be something that we need to interact, but they need to, of course, to require, rethink a bit their business model, not build the entire network and govern it, but be interacting with different networks and aspects. And also, in our case, we are now providing the public service information, but at a certain stage, we need to interact with private networks, private sector networks. So it will be a bigger ecosystem. You need to realize in that sense.
I mean,
sorry, Alec, also to remark that both, not only EBSI, but also Europass, all the code and information will be public available. So, as Daniel said, they have the opportunity to reuse and also see, okay, when we really add value, because the other makes no sense. And maybe I can also answer to the next question about interoperability, and it's also important to and apologize because I didn't say it at the beginning, but the interoperability in EBCI is made by design. So from the beginning, two different DLT technologies exist in EBCI. Ethereum, Hyperledger Vesu and Hyperledger Fabric were also already provided with EBCI version 1, and all the services on all the layers guarantee in the interoperability within the layer and independence and interoperability from the upper layers, the service layers and so on, to the lower layers like infrastructure components and so on. So this is the interoperability is inspired by design in EBCI.
The next question really is almost like a wider interoperability. So Steve Horn, Stevens from Malta, is asking, are there provisions for non-EU award issuers, so universities and colleges, to provide authentication of the claimed awards made by EU citizens? I think it's another $1 million question. Yeah.
Yes, yes, it is. Of course, I think, and Daniel can correct me, but of course, the main objective for EU is the European Commission, is EU and cross-border across EU member states. But like Daniel also talked, that ESIF is also ESIF EBSI. EBCI ESIF is also talking with the main standardization bodies or the main bodies that are defining the related ESIF social identity standards. We are also talking with standardization bodies, and also with those entities that, because at the end, mobility, of course, within the European Union is a reality, but also it's also a reality abroad, and that's why we are talking with different initiatives, like the ones led by the Digital Consortium, or another initiative that also the European Commission is talking with countries abroad of the European Union. But
yeah, that's indeed important to mention. So we thought, let's fix first the European, but very rapidly other countries came to see, okay, how can we interact? And now the Commission is also talking with Canada, with Australia. We have similar initiatives also looking at, and that will be a very interesting proof of this project, of a test of this project. How can we link it in an international way? And that is the most added value, of course. So.
I think that's key, actually, because in a way, I mean, I'm looking at the next question where Ilona is asking, you know, how will universities embark on this? So, you know, and universities are part of the course. Now there are so many different models around Europe. So Ilona's saying, have you discussed the next steps to facilitate wider implementation? I guess we're still at the stage of design and building pilots. But I think this, what you're mentioning, Daniel, that in a way, the interest which is coming in from outside the EU is also potentially encouraging people within the EU that, you know, this is not just a technology project in a way. And also there's potentially an opportunity for the EU to take a lead in something global, because the EU can do something like this, which maybe other regions cannot do. So I wonder what you think about it.
That is an important topic, because we see it differently. In Europe, you know, and there's an international audience. Sometimes people say we over-regulate, but I think in the near future, and it's my personal opinion, that you will be getting regulation about what you can store in an identity wallet and how it's managed. It can be like a bank account, in my opinion. Yeah. So Europe will be having rules. Let the market completely free and do whatever you want with that identity wallet, where the person has the most medical, social, financial information. To let that completely free in a Far West style, it will not happen. So I think we'll be having rules, and I hope in the close interaction that we can define certain rules based on what we have called European democratic values, to see how can we protect the citizens. If you saw the statement of President von der Leyen, it was how can we protect our citizens against all those kind of things. The good intention of the big techs, all good and well, but at the end their data is being exploited. So this will come. It's about also data sovereignty of people and protection. So we're not going to build a European fort just to allow that, but it will also regulate the market at a certain point. Too early to have rules on it, but we will guide from member states at how can the citizen be that in.
I'm conscious of time, so with your permission, we may go over 10 minutes over time, if that's okay with everybody. And I realize we're late. There's a couple of questions maybe we should look at. One's from Berlin. One thing I don't get yet, it may be slightly off, is how the single digital gateway SDG efforts of the EC, specifically those for exchanging student data via evidences which look like yet another credentials file format, are connected to the efforts presented here in terms of Europass and EBSI. And I think this is probably related to Anthony, because I think this person might have actually contacted Anthony. If it's too difficult to answer now, maybe Anthony should get in touch with our colleague in Berlin. Anthony, you there?
I am here. So all I will say for the moment, when we're looking at the single digital gateway, the single digital gateway regulates the first set of which, at least in the educational domain, at least in so it provides for the a gateway to send recognition statements through ENIC/NARIC centers. And then there is also some stuff about sending mobility instances between institutions. At the moment, exchange of credentials to and from public administrations is not actually a single digital gateway service. Given all the work that's happening, it wouldn't surprise me if there's, let's say, a single digital gateway too, that this would be a prime candidate for inclusion. But at least if you look at the directive today, it only covers recognition statements to and from ENIC/NARIC centers.
Okay, this question from Sophie, I think it's related to exams. What about the use of a blockchain during online exams? Does anybody have any views on that? What we could do it? Let alone we should remove all exams, which is another issue though, but not for this, not for this webinar.
Yes, to a new model, yeah, of qualification. You're right, Alex. Here it is important to remark that this is we to answer that, to correctly answer that, we need to okay, what do you mean for that? What do you want to store and why? Does it make sense? Yes or not? Because I think it's also important to remark that it was said, but let me remark it again. The digital credentials, the diploma itself, will be issued directly to the student. So no data will be on chain. Just the fact itself that some of the diploma issuance will be. So just metadata related to that and to the status itself of the diploma issued. But the diploma itself will be directly issued to the student, and he will store, manage, and control his or her data. So to correctly answer that, we need more context and say, okay, and does it really make sense? Yes or no?
Okay, there's a question from Lena Zulwalka saying, are the public incentives for employment aligned with the use of this infrastructure? And I'm not sure have we got that far to think about
at this moment, it is a bit difficult. Of course, you have possibilities to see that, and one of the next use cases that will be tackled in EBSI ASIF is the European Social Security number. So all things related with Social Security and with employee-employer interaction. So you could have also looked at those kind of things. Huh? But at this moment, we are now focusing on the diploma case to have that solved. But then broader, if you put a citizen interaction, he can also be used in employment aspect. No? Of course, it is a limitation of maybe the possibility that we see how we can tackle certain things with big data and have profiling and those kind of things. This approach is a bit against those kind of things. Huh? So if certain governments are also thinking, okay, how can we do that, easily match certain profiles and certain expectation and have that via sources, this approach is a bit different. Huh? So that you have the citizen control of the data and not somebody above your head. So it is aligned, but we need to see what kind of model works best for those kind of things. Huh?
Thanks, Daniel. Could I ask, Luis, can I share my screen? Because I think, first of all, there are some people who have had to leave. So Anthony had to leave.
Yes, just let me, 2 final slides. One, let me remark that, but I think that all of us, we really believe in this. So the best way to predict your future is to create it. We believe in this, and I think that you can feel it. So let's do it. And just a spoiler for if you DEL4ALL invite us again, and a spoiler for the next episode that could be okay. We have talked about accreditation and how all this could be also used to guarantee interoperability on the ongoing learning path. That's something that Alex, DEL4ALL, if you invite us, we will be glad to contribute. Okay.
Definitely. So let me cut to the chase. Of course, I mean, my feeling is from some of the conversations which have been happening in the background, I think certainly we'll move to another session at some stage in the new year. Just allow me as a final thing, because if I don't do this, I think Claudia, my colleague, will kill me. But I would really love it if anybody who's involved, out there and is interested in this project, there is a URL over here. You are going to be able to see the video, by the way, of this recording. We are constantly asking people to help us with a third survey. And again, we're collecting data really so that we can actually help the Commission make better, more informed information about funding research in the immediate future. So we've got a survey ongoing right now, which will run till the 6th of December. Many of you have expertise in some of these, okay, but this time we're really focusing on emerging tech from blockchain, AI, IoT, you name it, gaming, analytics, but also down to conference tools, because as those of us who are in the trenches of education realize that what happened in March was, there were many educators who had to try and find out how to use a keyboard, let alone, what to do with Zoom. So we're trying to collect best practices, use cases. We're also interested in technologies which are becoming mainstream in recent months. So the idea really is, if you can A, help us with the survey, and B, there is literally an open door for you to join the community of experts as it is assembled around DEL4ALL. There's another year plus of this project to get going. And the fact that it will be transitioning, hopefully, from intense COVID to post-COVID, you're going to be seeing a lot of changes, I think, in the models of education as we know them right now. I think that's all I had. If anybody else wants to butt in, the floor is yours. Other than that, I'd like to thank everybody who joined us for the panel. Thank you, Louise and Hani and Anthony and Dominic and Daniel. Really, thank you very much. And I think there's a lot going on. And I repeat, I think the real opportunity for this project is that it's not just the Commission. I go back to what Daniel said. It's not just that the Commission is doing something. There are a lot of people watching this and loudly telling the Commission, just because you build it, people will not necessarily come. At the same time, the Commission is asking people, tell us what's happening in your specific country. So we try and build an infrastructure, a highway that is as culture agnostic as possible in a way. And that's why at the moment there are these calls out for pilots, and the Commission has been funding some of these, or will be funding some of these, for people to experiment with these pilots on EBSI. Okay, so the door is open. So whether it's via me, via our partners at DEL4ALL, and these people are extremely accessible. Should you need to have more information, and my gut feeling is, towards the beginning of next year, we will run Mark 2 of this webinar. Okay. Thank you very much. If you don't have anything else, I think we can all bless ourselves and go and have some tea or coffee or whatever it is you have. Okay. Thank you all very much. And it's lovely to see some colleagues I haven't seen for a while, from Alona to Sabine to Wolfgang. Thank you very much for being here, including people on the other side of the pond. I can see Harry Patrinos over there in Washington, Natalie in Dallas. So thank you very much. Take care of yourselves and stay safe, all of you. Bye-bye.